Alright, let's look at a few more puzzle pieces and then we're going to start putting all this together. In John, I believe it was chapter 4, verse 35, he said, "Say ye not, there are 4 months unto harvest, but look upon the field, for the harvest is already white." He's alluding to the fact that we have 3 4-month segments within our calendar year. Okay, so here he's showing us there are going to be 3 separate harvests. Your first fruits, your main harvest, and your gleanings. It'll be 4 months to this harvest, 4 months to this harvest, and then 4 months back around to start the harvest again. So from here to here's 4 months, from here to here's about 4 months, and from here back around to here is another 4 months. So in essence, if you're looking at the 3 harvest cycles of the bride, what you're looking at is a parallel to the first coming of Jesus. There's a break in the middle, and then the second coming of Jesus. It's almost like what we did earlier with the Passover and the tabernacles and the Pentecost in between, with those 4 50-day segments. That's basically what you're looking at. You're also looking at a parallel of the 7-year timeline. So if we have 4 years, 2 years, and 1 year for the tribulation period, you have the 2-part bride, the martyred saints, and the elect. And that's what you're seeing here, the 2-part bride, the martyred saints, and the elect. If we go back to the 4 watches where he comes for the bride, or both brides in the 4th watch, he comes for the martyred saints. In the 2nd watch, he comes for the elect right here in the 1st watch. This is what it will look like, okay? You have the 4th watch where he does 4 gatherings. You have the double first fruits, the main harvest, and the gleaning. The double first fruits, the main harvest, and the gleaning. Then in the 2nd watch, he'll come for 2 gatherings. Right here at his True Tabernacles, and then the Christmas time to Hanukkah. And then on the elect, he will come in the 1st watch for 1 gathering, and he will come at Passover. So here's your Passover, your Pentecost / Tabernacles, and then your Hanukkah to Hanukkah. Okay? The reason why he's doing this is because he said he would gather his elect from one end of heaven to the other. The elect have to be in heaven to come back with Jesus down here at the second coming. Another reason he's doing it like this is because Jesus said that unless those days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the sake of the elect, right here, those days will be shortened by about 6 months. Now go back to the sun and moon. The moon comes in 10 days too soon. That means the moon is 10 days behind the sun. So I want you to imagine this little boy pulling a wagon. The little boy represents the sun, and the moon is sitting in this wagon. Every time he walks forward, he's dragging that moon with him. So if the moon is representing 10 days earlier than the sun, let's look at what that does to our feast days. Now, during the week of Passover is on the 14th. Unleavened bread is the 15th through the 22nd. During this week of Passover right here, we have what is called revolving first fruits. Now, the Bible says that first fruits will be the morrow after the Sabbath. So, if the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, falls on the 15th and the 22nd, then we would have to have first fruits on the 22nd, 23rd, or the 23rd, 24th, depending on the time zones. Okay? When Jesus died on the cross, the weekly Sabbath was on the 16th. So he resurrected on first fruits the morrow after the weekly Sabbath, right here on the 17th. Okay? But Because of the clues in Daniel, talking about the first month, 24th day, and Passover is in the first month of God's calendar. It's the month of May. Because of Daniel's clue, we are looking at the possibility. Oh, and let me not forget all the 10-day clues that Jesus gave us in the scripture as well. Noah had to wait an extra 10 days to get off the ark. And then we have in the book of Revelation, Jesus told the churches that they would have 10 days of persecution. Some of them would go to prison for 10 days and things like that. What he's referring to is this right here, what we call the 10-day shift. All right? Because of the clue Daniel gave us about the first month, 24th day, we can assume that there's going to be a rapture where the weekly Sabbath will fall right outside that week of unleavened bread, and the first fruits will end up being the morrow after the Sabbath, which will be around the 23rd, 24th. Because the moon is 10 days behind the sun, and because the sun is dragging the moon behind it, and because the sun represents Jesus and the moon represents the bride of Christ, in essence what we're doing is we're dragging the moon into the week of Passover. Okay? Now the same thing goes for Feast of Trumpets as well as Tabernacles. God's Feast of Trumpets is Halloween. 10 days later is His Day of Atonement. When we're dragging the moon into October 31st, that's going to put the sun calendar down here on November 9th and 10th. That puts the moon around Halloween. So in essence, the sun is dragging the bride into the Feast of Trumpets. Same thing with Tabernacles. When the sun's down here on the 8th great day of Tabernacles, it's dragging the moon 10 days behind it into Tabernacles. You can do the same thing with Hanukkah. If the Jews are celebrating their Hanukkah, let's say around December 15th, then the sun would be down on December 25th, and it would be dragging the moon into their Hanukkah on December the 15th. That's what that would look like. And also, these extra 10 days are going to play a key role in the second coming of Jesus, which I'll teach you about later on. When He actually returns, it's going to be 10 days later. So when we talk about the first month, 24th day, we actually have a play on calendars, kind of like you would have a play on words. God is using a play on calendars. The first month, 24th day on the Gentile calendar is actually God's true Hanukkah. The first month, 24th day on God's true calendar, what the Jews would call the month of Nisan, would be the month of May. That is the week of Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits. Okay? Then we have November the 24th, which is God's true tabernacles. Now, on the Jewish calendar, they celebrate the 7th month as being the first month, when in fact, it should be their 7th month. So instead of having Passover in their first month, they're having Feast of Trumpets. They call it Rosh Hashanah, which is head of the year. That is their first month. So this is a play off of the Jewish calendar. Even though the Jewish calendar is a month, sometimes 6 weeks behind God's calendar, He's still playing off their calendar. So we have the Gentile calendar, God's calendar, and the Jewish calendar. In other words, what God is saying is, devil, you ain't done nothing by changing these calendars. I knew you were going to do it before I ever created you, and I already had a plan for it. Here it is. He's also mocking the devil because he's showing us the 3 gathering times right here. Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles. Now, if you recall, The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are like a course of graduation. You start out as a new believer and you grow into being a bride of Christ. So Matthew represents the elect. These are new believers. Mark talks to the martyred saints. Sorry, y'all. There we go. Mark talks to the martyred saints. Luke and John talk to the Jewish bride and the Gentile bride, respectively. And if you look in the Gospels at the end time studies, you will see that each Gospel speaks to each different group. And it tells you when that group is going to leave. But if you look in those same end time sections, what they call the Olivet Discourse, it's when Jesus told his disciples about his second coming. You're going to see the order of the timeline, okay? In Matthew, he talked about the days of Noah. If you look in Mark, he actually mentions second Passover very specifically. If you look in Luke, you're going to see him mention summertime. And if you look in John, Jesus escaped when? At Hanukkah. And here's the beauty of the Gospels. It doesn't matter if you go in reverse order or go in regular order. It still shows you the order of the timeline. Now, if we look in the Gospel of Matthew, he talks about the days of Noah. The days of Noah can mean a lot of different things. It can mean the 1 year and 10 days. It can mean the 5 months that the rain waters were on the earth. It can mean the 40 days and nights of rain. It can mean a lot of things. So here we see the 1 year and 10 day timeline. We see the 40 days before each group ascends. And we see the 5 months from here to here. Okay? Now, another reason he pointed to these 40 days is because each group will have to go through a series of 40-day testings in the spirit, in the soul, and in the body before each group gets raptured. But I won't go into that any deeper. And of course, if we look at Mark, he mentions second Passover point blank. There's no way around that. All right? If you look in Luke, he's talking about summertime. All right? Well, summertime runs from here to here. And we know that the summer in Israel ends on Halloween, which is the Feast of Trumpets time frame right here. And in the Gospel of John, we have Jesus escaping when? At Hanukkah. And it's the story of Lazarus, where it represents both the Christmas and the true Hanukkah. Now, if we reverse the Gospels and look at them, we're going to see the same timeline. So once again, we have the Hanukkah. Okay? Then in Luke, he's talking about summertime. In Mark, once again, second Passover. That's not going to change. And then in Matthew, he talks about the days of Noah. On the Jewish calendar, the second month, 17th day, would be around the November time frame on their calendar. So there it is right there. So even in the Gospels, we see God using a play on calendars here. So now that we've constructed the basic timeline for the raptures, let's look at the actual calendar dates, okay? We have the first group of first fruits at first Passover. This is going to be your group that goes around May 14th through May 24th. Now, there is a 10-day period right here. The second group we're looking for is going to be around June 14th through June the 24th. And here again, y'all, give or take 24, 48 hours. When we get to the third group, we're looking for November the 14th through November 24th. And then the last group, we're looking for December 14th through December 24th. So this first group, we're looking at an ascension around June 24th through July 3rd or 4th, give or take 24 to 48 hours. Right here, it's going to be July 24th through August 3rd or 4th. And then right here, this group will ascend around 12/24 or so through January 3rd, something like that. And then this last group would be around January 24th through February 3rd, give or take 24, 48 hours. So we were talking about the 4 cycles and the first fruits being moved to the end of the week of unleavened bread, where first fruits landed on the first month, 24th day. So we were looking at, tentatively May 24th, June 24th, November, and December 24th, okay, for these 4 groups. Well, Jesus reminded me of the 40 days of the dedication of a child. When a male child is born, you have that 7 days that the baby dwells with the family, and then it's circumcised, and then 33 days later, it is taken to the temple and is dedicated to God, right? So in our symbolism, the circumcision of the child represents being taken or removed from the earth, all right? If we have 40 days from here, that was July 4th, right? But if we divide it up into the 7 and 33, that comes out to be about somewhere around June the 1st. This one comes out to be around July the 1st. This one comes out to be around December the 1st. And this one's around January the 1st. Y'all, somewhere in there, okay? 1st, 2nd. But we have the 7 days, the circumcision. So that would represent the removal from the earth. And then 33 days later would be the July 4th. Right here. All right? So right here on this second group, we have the June 24th. 7 days later, so it's going to be somewhere around July 1st or 2nd, somewhere in there. So what ends up happening is you have a crossover between 2 things that are happening simultaneously. You have this first group right here that's ascending on their 40th day, right as this group right here, the second group, is going through their 7-day circumcision, right here. So you have this crossover between 2 groups that are happening right here at this moment. So this right here is going to be involving the 144,000 in this second group. They're actually going to witness the ascension of this group right here. Now, you have disciples, bishops, and elders. Those who are being saved saved in spirit, those who are saved in soul, and those who are and will be saved in the body. All right? So when the elders are taken right here, they have to go to heaven and they have to witness Jesus opening the 7 seals. Because I told you the first seal will happen right here at second Passover, 1 on each feast day. Okay? So they're going to witness the opening of the seals right here. He wasn't kidding about the 24 elders. Now that doesn't mean that there's only 24 people being raptured this first year. What it means is that there are 24 elders that are going right here. So the Bible, the way it's written in Revelation, is you have the 24 elders showing up, and then you have this multitude from every tongue, language, nation. You get it, Okay, so that's what's happening. The elders show up first, and then the rest of these come in. Remember how I told you the moon was being drugged behind the sun, and it's 10 days behind? And I told you that on May 24th, the moon was being brought into Passover on May 14th. 7 days later, at the circumcision, which represents the removal from the earth, being circumcised from the world. So what that does is if the sun comes into June 1st, that drags the moon down to May 21st, which is the last day of unleavened bread. Now we get all the way over here to the ascension around July 4th. Where does that leave the moon? It leaves the moon 10 days behind on what day? June 27th, which is what? The second month, 27th day. It's the day Noah got off the ark. It's the day Jesus ascended. Now, just like with Lazarus, the wording of the day count for the ascension of Jesus is very vague, and it was done that way on purpose. You know how I showed you the day count with Lazarus represented both Christmas time and God's true Hanukkah, which was a month later. Well, you can read the ascension story two ways. You can have, Jesus ascending 40 days after his resurrection, or you can have an additional 8 days and then 40 days to his ascension. And what that does is it represents both June 27th, the day that Jesus ascended, plus the July 4th, when this first group will ascend, right here. So God's really pointing at this 7th day right here, the circumcision day, as being the day of the rapture that we're looking for. So looking at the two witnesses, we know from the book of Revelation they will testify for 1,260 days. We also know they're going to resurrect at Christmas time. Okay? But they're going to lie in the street dead for 3.5 days. That means that if they resurrect on Christmas Day, the latest day they could possibly resurrect would be Christmas Day, then that means they were dead around December 21st. This goes back to what I was telling you earlier about the sun, the S-U-N, and how it's said to die on December 21st and then resurrect on December 25th. It's also a parallel back to Lazarus, if you remember that teaching, okay? So if we start at December 21st and we go back 1,260 days, it lands exactly on July the 10th. Now, if you're going to go study the calendars in relation to Bible prophecy, there are a couple things you need to know. When we study prophecy, we're going to see God doing a play on calendars. And there are 3 calendars that he is going to play off of. Now, these calendars do not necessarily determine the day in which Jesus will return, but we do see God either recognizing those calendars and or telling us not to use those calendars, okay? So, of course, we have the Gentile calendar, which is known as the Gregorian calendar, that we often use. The Jewish people have their own calendar that they use, and it's different from ours. And then, of course, God has the biblical calendar that he used, for prophecy, okay? Now, there are 3 different types of calendar systems. A calendar can be made according to the 4 seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. A calendar can be made according to the moon, or a calendar can be made according to the sun. And of course, these are not the only calendars in the world, okay? We actually have another calendar that was given to us in the book of Enoch. Now, Enoch is not part of the canonical books here, but he did mention a calendar in his writings. Now, the calendar that Enoch gave us is not based on the sun or the moon. It's actually based on the 4 seasons. He told us when to start spring, summer, fall, and winter, and where the sun would be in the sky in relation to the 4 seasons. And he told us, and this is incorporated into our Gregorian system, but he told us that spring would start around the spring equinox or equinox, which is somewhere between March the 16th and March the 21st. And then he told us to count 91 days, so that would be 3 months plus the 1 day to change the season, okay? Then we go into summer. We do that for 91 days, fall 91 days, and winter for 91 days, okay? But we do not use that as a calendar system in terms of how to count the feast days. So the first month of the Enoch calendar is going to be in March, okay? But we do not use that in terms of God's feast days. You know how God told us that Passover would be the 14th day of the first month. All right, he's not talking about the Enoch calendar of the 4 seasons, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. So the 4-season calendar that Enoch gave us is simply based on the seasons of the year, okay? Then you have a lunar calendar that's based on the cycles of the moon. But you can't use the lunar calendar for anything because it's 10 days off every year. So it never comes out right. It's 10 days short every single year. So you have these 10 days that just linger and do absolutely nothing, okay? But then you have the solar calendar. The solar calendar is based on the harvest cycle. It's based on when we plant, when we sow, when we reap, that kind of thing, okay? The Gregorian calendar was a combination of the solar calendar and the 4 seasons. And of course we know the Gregorian calendar starts somewhat in winter, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but that's how they did it. All right, so it's the Gentile Gregorian calendar is based on the sun, but they don't start it at the right time. All right, then you have the Jewish calendar. It is a combination of the solar and lunar calendar. So they determine all their months based on the moon, but they don't determine their years based on the moon. They determine their year based on the sun. And they make all these adjustments where they add an extra month every so many years, like a leap month, to get caught up with the sun. It's very hard to keep up with, and it doesn't make any sense, okay? And then you have God's calendar, which is based solely on the sun. This is the one God told us to use in the Bible. This is the one God told us how to count in the Bible. God told us to number our days. Days are determined by the sun. All right? It has nothing to do with the moon or the 4 seasons. It is the sun. Now, God's solar calendar is going to tell us the harvest, the feast days, and it's going to tell us what we want to know in prophecy about the return of Jesus. Now, one such example God gave us in the Bible was about the crops. When Moses and the Israelites were getting ready to leave Egypt, we have a clue that tells us there was a plague of hail. Now, keep in mind, the hail happened right before the Passover, and Passover is the first month of the solar calendar, the harvest calendar, and the 14th day of that first month. So this plague of hail is happening somewhere before the first month, 14th day. All right? And keep in mind, that's the first month of the harvest. Harvest, not the seasons, the harvest. All right? And he tells us that the barley was destroyed by the hail, but the wheat was not. Well, there's only one way that can happen. We had to have a crossover between a barley harvest and a wheat that's sprouting, Okay? So we had a mature barley harvest that was standing tall, it was dry, it was hard, and it got destroyed by the hail. But then you have the spring wheat, which is barely sprouting. It's tiny, it's green, it's soft, and the hail did not destroy it. It knocked it over maybe, but it didn't destroy it. Okay, so that tells us we have a crossover between our winter crops and our spring crops. So when we have a crossover between a mature harvest and the sprouting of a new harvest, that's a crossover between the winter harvest and the spring harvest. There's only one time that can happen, y'all, and that's mid to late April. Okay? We know that the last part of the barley harvest was taken in April, and we know that the spring wheat is sprouting in late April. Okay? So when we talk about the harvest cycles and we talk about Passover and things like that, we're looking at a May time frame, like mid-May, somewhere in there, for Passover. And in fact, the Bible does support this. So as you do your studies in prophecy, please remember and understand we're looking for God's calendar that's based on the sun only in relation to the harvest cycles and our symbolism involving the harvest cycles as well as the feast days.